to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. I'm your host, Brooke Mitchell, and today's webinar is Capture the Aurora on a Northern Lights photo expedition with Nat Hab expedition leader and pro photographer Eddy Savage. Thank you so much for being here today, Eddy. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here to talk about the Northern Lights photo expedition. I'm pretty excited to head up there in the next few weeks and get started with some phenomenal aurora viewing, we hope. Today, folks, if you have seen one of these know before you goes for a Northern Lights trip, this one's going to be a little bit different in the sense that it's gonna look the same at the beginning, but then the bulk of the presentation right in the middle is going to be focused on getting your camera kit ready. So we do have a little bit of a difference when it comes to our Northern Lights photo expeditions, which is, of course, there's a heavy focus on photography. And so I want to give you my best insight into preparing yourself to get the best possible photography experience on this trip, as well as be ready for the trip in general. But with our photo expeditions in general, we're making decisions and we're focusing on creating photo opportunities for you, whether that's daytime or nighttime. But the most important thing before heading out on any photo expedition is being prepared once you or before you go and when you arrive. So, look, some folks with the Northern Lights. Isn't that nice? Some tripods on the ground there. But so first things first, folks, this is where we're going to be going on the trip. This is Churchill, Manitoba, situated at the edge of the Hudson Bay. When we fly in there, it should look similar to this with the Churchill River over to the left being frozen and kind of off to the horizon and to the right in this image is the Hudson Bay, which will also have a significant amount of ice on it. The town itself, you can see this is kind of where all our resources are, but this is the comfortable town of Churchill, Manitoba, population a little over 800. And one of my favorite things about Churchill is that basically it doesn't matter whether it's the day or the night, we're going to have a heavy focus on night photography and spending time out waiting for the aurora to arrive and then capitalizing on those opportunities. But also throughout the day, we are in a remarkable northern environment at the tree line, the edge of the boreal forest, between kind of that transition zone between the boreal forest and the tundra. And it is a winter like no other. So, one of my favorite parts of these expeditions, and I'm not sure how many of you have experienced a true kind of subarctic winter, but one of my favorite parts of this is just being out there in such a different environment from what I'm used to in the rainforest here on the west coast of Canada, into basically a very cold and desolate and strikingly beautiful place. So lots of really special things to see during the daytime. But when you start this trip, basically your trip begins once you arrive in Winnipeg, and this is what the arrival halls look like um, for your arrival into Winnipeg. And basically, we're going to have a representative there. They'll be wearing, they'll have a Nat Hab logo on them. They'll probably have a board with a little Nat Hab logo on it as well. They'll be looking for you, and it helps if you're looking for them. But they will be around basically the baggage collection zone, and oftentimes they'll be waiting kind of where you will exit into the baggage area. And if you don't see them right away, we know that you're coming, and we will be looking for you. So that is very important. We're keeping track of all that. Now, if you get delayed along the way and you can't get a hold, or you're not sure if someone's going to be there to collect you on your arrival into Winnipeg because of the delay, in your pre-departure briefing, you will find basically a phone number to call that will get you in touch with the right people if there's a delay along the way. So keep in mind that pre-departure briefing. I'm sure you've noticed it's referenced to quite a lot because it's a very important piece of the success of your expedition is that pre-departure briefing. So Next, uh, yeah, so this is it's just two different views of the baggage arrival there. Um, Moving on, this is where we're going to be staying in Winnipeg. This is the Fort Garry Hotel, a beautiful old railway hotel from the built in the early 1900s. It's right in the heart of downtown and very close to a wonderful place called the Fork. So if you have a bit of extra time before your expedition, there's it's a short walk to head down to the Forks and a lovely area. So you will be staying there basically on day one of the trip, and this is where your welcome dinner will be as well. And the welcome dinner, pretty much a good chunk of what I'm going to talk about as far as logistics today will be reiterated in the welcome dinner, and then there'll also be a number of other introductions. But that's very important. You'll arrive at the Fort Garry Hotel. You'll check into the hotel. You'll be handed a welcome letter, and on that welcome letter there'll be some very important information, um, such as your gear pickup time. So on day one of the trip, you'll see that there's going to be a pickup time scheduled either between 11 and 1, 1 and 3, or 3 and 5, depending on your group. And we schedule that so that you can have the opportunity to meet your expedition leader and really feel comfortable in the winter gear that we lend to you. So I'm going to get into this in a really big way in just a second, but just a few of the loaner items that we've got. We have parkas, the blue parkas as pictured. We have fleece jackets, which is the gentleman on the left there, that the fleece kind of winter jacket goes underneath the parka. We have snow pants to lend, boots, large mitts, heavy mitts, neck gaiters, which you can see um, over the gentleman's face. We also have some warm hats, balaclavas, and hand and foot warmers that we have available for you at the Fort Garry Hotel. Now that's what we give you, but you're going to have to, figure out what you're going to wear underneath all of that. And so that's where I want to jump right in to kind of this next step of the Fort Garry Hotel, which is uh, kind of ensuring you've got everything you need. Well, I guess before you get to the Fort, before you leave your home, you want to make sure you've got the rest of the winter gear. So this is my cold weather kit, and this is what I wear pretty much every single night that we go out to watch the aurora. There's some things that we might do if we're walking during the daytime and maybe expending a little bit more energy. We don't necessarily want to have all the layers on like this, um, but we're going to probably want a few of them if we're going to uh, heading out for sunset or something like that, and it's going to be really, really cold and maybe expose a little bit to the wind, then yes, we're probably going to want to wear most of everything. But where we get the coldest and where we spend the most time outside for the whole expedition is usually at night at our viewing locations. So we do have a warm space to go at each of our viewing locations. So you're never forced to be outside for any longer than you want to be. But as photographers, as folks that are often dealing, well, we will be dealing with tripods and cameras and all that kind of stuff. Photography trips, hands down, spend the most time outside, especially if the northern lights are going off. So you want to make sure that you've got a really, really good photography or really, really good cold weather kit with you. Now, this is what I wear every night. And now I will tell you, some people run cold, some people run warm. You know yourself better than anybody. And so I will tell you that I run typically warm. And this is what I pick for the nights where we're often outside at minus 20 Fahrenheit to minus 40 Fahrenheit, and sometimes even a little bit colder. So waist down, I've always got a thin pair and a thick pair of socks, usually wool, merino wool base layer bottom, or like long johns or something similar. It doesn't have to be merino wool, it just has to be a comfortable layer. I usually wear fleece pants. Some people have like these fancy down pants, or kind of an athletic pant, but you want it to be a relatively heavy pant. And then snow pants, and that's something that we lend you, is a pair of snow pants. Now, I say this, but if you've got space in your luggage and you have a pair of good snow pants, like, insulated, not just a windbreaker, but an insulated pair of snow pants that you know fit you, you're welcome to bring those. You're also welcome to bring those, try them out. If they don't, if they don't hold up to the ones that we offer you, you're always welcome to leave yours at the Fort Garry Hotel in our storage facility there. Now from the waist up, merino wool base layer. This basically the merino wool base layer I pretty much wear every day. I've got a couple that I rotate through during the expedition, but I wear the merino wool base layer because it's just necessary in the winter up there is to have a nice, solid, warm layer at the bottom. On top of that, I wear a fleece vest, just like this one that I'm wearing now. Um, Down jacket. So I have a down jacket. It's like this Patagonia down jacket. It's one of the Nat Hab ones. You can find them in the gear store. Um, that's really nice for me. I will also exchange that with the winter fleece jacket that Nat Hab provides as one of the things we can lend you. So that's a really nice layer to have. And then on top of those three layers, I also have my parka. Now, keep in mind, I run pretty warm. That's what I'm wearing at night, almost every night. If you're somebody who runs a little bit colder, you probably want to have a few more thinner layers to go on at the base. So layers is the most important thing. If you've got a good selection of layers to wear, you can always take layers off while we're out at night. But if you don't bring enough, you can't just create a layer out of nothing. So you want to make sure you do have a few layers for those nights and for any daytime activities where we're expected to be outside for a long time. And then for my extremities, I've gone through probably about 10 or so different pairs of gloves, and I would honestly say that the gloves that I've set on are basically they're going to be like smartphone capable synthetic glove liners. I've used merino wool. I've used some thicker, heavier ones. The merino wool ones are really, really nice, but I find in particular with the camera operation, we're maneuvering tripods, we're taking cameras on and off, we're dealing with all kinds of dials and sometimes rough edges. And I found that my merino wool glove liners, they wear through quite quickly. So I would look for a pair of smartphone um, capable synthetic glove liners if they are part windproof on one side or partially windproof. That's also a really great um, thing because when you got your hands in your mitts, then you want to go change a dial on your camera, you got to pop your hand out of that heavy glove and go and change it. And that even if your hand's only out for 15 seconds, it feels that minus 40. In particular, if there's a little breeze. So I find synthetic glove liners with a little bit of windproofing is great, and smartphone touch capability is great too. And then for your head, so we give you, or we can lend you basically the neck gaiter, a warm hat, balaclava. Those help underneath a warmer hat. The hat that I wear, it's basically got flaps on the ears, so it protects my ears and then up on my head too. So we have options for you, but if you want to have something really kind of really solid that's going to last a long time, look for one of those kind of classic. I think they're called like bomber hats. I might actually have mine right here. I'm not sure if you can see me, but that's what it looks like there. If you can't see me, then this is just great. Um, but yeah, so windproof protects me from those cold elements. So if you want to pick one of those up, great. Otherwise, we have some reasonable solutions for you in Winnipeg. And just a reminder, these are the things that we are lending out. So parka, fleece jacket, snow pants, boots, mittens, neck gaiter, hat, balaclava, and hand and foot warmers. And we'll have hand and foot warmers both in Winnipeg and up in Churchill for you. And here's just a nice one to emphasize kind of the cold weather layering system. So long sleeve shirt, long pants, nice base layer, sweatshirt or fleece, pants, a couple pairs of socks, shell jacket or the parka and the bib pants. Bib pants are nice if you've got them, but otherwise we have a variety of snow pants for you, and then a head warmer, gloves, and boots. Really, really good. All of this information, of course, that I'm sharing with you can be found in your pre-departure briefing. And if you're looking for a very a complete packing list of what to bring, this is where you want to look, is in your pre-departure briefing in your online portal. That is where just every single detail and a little explanation about it exists. So I would recommend checking that out. Um, as well, now from here about kind of the preparation with gear and making sure that you're prepared for the cold. The next step is we're going to start talking about Northern Lights photography, camera selection, and equipment in particular. So, you can come, you want to make sure, I want to make sure that you've got the right stuff with you as you travel from your home to Winnipeg and then to Churchill. So I'm going to go through that, and fantastic new development from Nat Hab is this Northern Lights photography guide. And this Northern Lights photography guide was put together by Court Whelan. He's a long time Nat Hab expedition leader, and fantastic photographer. And he's put together this guide that basically has tons of really good information about, selecting the lenses, selecting the right equipment, and it's quite comprehensive. So I would recommend after this webinar or, light reading before bed, have a look at the Northern Lights photography guide. Um, Something I really like to emphasize is the better prepared you can be um, with your equipment and with your gear and all that kind of stuff before you arrive in Winnipeg, and before we head up to Churchill. We're no doubt going to be, working on, like on the photo expeditions, we'll be working on different types of photography, and we'll be able to kind of coach you and help you with shutter speeds and apertures and troubleshooting and all that kind of stuff. And but it really helps if we're not trying to, uh, it, it really helps if you just practice with your gear in the dark first. So everything that I'm saying here, you'll see. I'll come back to it, but just trying out and practicing with your gear at home. Go into the bathroom at after dinner, wear all your gear, bring your camera in there, turn the lights off, etc. Just work through it. So this next step here, folks, we're going to start talking about selecting a camera. So what's the best camera for this trip, for a photography trip up to view the Northern Lights during the winter in the subarctic of Canada? So the first thing I want you to do when you're thinking about selecting a camera is, what are your goals for the trip? So when as a photographer, as a professional photographer myself, oftentimes what I'm trying to capture is I want to create an image that is something that I'm going to take home and I will print. And sometimes when I say printing, that might mean printing it in a quality that's great enough. I could print it, 4 to 6 feet wide, really large scale print with really, really high quality, or it could be down to like an 8 by 10 or something like that. But basically, I want to make sure that I've got, really, really good quality. Um, so that's my personal goal. Now, if you're more interested in you just want to post some stuff onto Instagram or Facebook, and it doesn't need to be high quality, and you're probably not going to reproduce it in a large scale, or that's not something that you'd like to do, then it's less important to have a really high quality camera. And I'll talk about some other options coming up. So as well, being familiar with the camera does help, because a lot of the adjustments that we're making it's going to be dark, and it's going to be 11 p.m. after a good day of other photography, 10, 11 p.m. And you'll be out there, and it's going to be -30, and you'll be wearing glove liners, and you'll be navigating with the red light on your headlamp, trying to adjust these small settings on your camera. And so definitely, if you've got a camera that you're familiar with, that's great. It doesn't mean to exclude any new cameras, or I'm not trying to stop you from getting a new camera. I'm just saying that being familiar with where certain buttons are, in particular, where the preview button is, how do you review your photos while you're out there, and adjusting your shutter speed and your ISO um, while you're kind of in the field. That type of familiarity really helps. So think about that when you're picking your camera to bring up with you. Um, for the best quality images for night photography, it's going to be a mirrorless or a DSLR camera. Mirrorless, that's kind of the new wave of most kind of enthusiast and professional level cameras are going to be mirrorless. And DSLR, I used a DSLR camera for Northern Lights up until last year, and if I if I had one still, I would still use it. They're fantastic as well. So don't be moved away by that. But mirrorless and DSLR are definitely the best. And one of the main things that you want to have on a camera when you're taking it, and that's why I say in one of my points is not all cameras work, is you want to be able to look at your camera and you need to be able to adjust your ISO, your aperture, your shutter speed, um, all individually of each other. So have a manual mode that you can do that. And you need to be able to either set up a self timer um, or a remote or something like that with your camera. Self timers is what I've been using for years. They're great. But basically, being able to freely change your mirrorless, or sorry, your shutter speed, ISO, and aperture, kind of all equally, and getting shutter speed lengths up to, let's say, 30 seconds, ISO up to, say, 3200, something like that. You know, those are going to be really important features of the camera. And when we talk about the cameras that won't work, if I talk about point and shoot and bridge cameras, some of them you can adjust the um, the shutter speed and the aperture and the ISO, but it'll basically like limit you. It'll say it's basically saying it's not capable of taking a picture like that. And if it limits you, um, then you can't really use it for northern lights unless we have like an extraordinarily bright display. And most of those cameras that I've seen that you know have the ability to change some of the settings, but they max out, they're usually point and shoot cameras or their bridge cameras. So, and another one is lots of batteries. So for one camera, if we have a night where it's very cold and we're photographing uh, the lights for a few hours, I might go through 3 to 4 batteries. So make sure that you have a good selection of backup batteries. Trust me, it really is a bummer if you're so focused on photography and 1 hour into the night because it's so cold outside, your camera battery gets sapped. So I really encourage you to focus on you know, getting some extra batteries. It was the first thing I did when I bought my new camera. Was like, oh, it comes with one battery. I went and bought 3 more right away. And so I would really recommend having a good roster of backup batteries that you're going to charge every single night in the hotel and make sure that they're full and ready to go for your day and for the night that we're out there. So lots of batteries is a good one. Now, what lens are you going to want to bring for Northern Lights photography? There's lots of different lenses that work, but the main considerations would be Northern Lights photography is landscape photography. And so we want to be able to capture as much of the sky as we can, as much of the foreground as we can. And typically these wider lenses, like a 12 millimeter, 16 millimeter, up to 24 millimeter, typically these wider lenses are also they also have they're really fast. They let a lot of light in, which makes them a lot better for doing night photography. So what you're going to want to look for on your camera lens is you want to find, you know, your widest lens. Do not bring a telephoto lens. Like, do not. Well, you can bring it, but don't use it for northern lights. Don't expect to use it for northern lights. Do not. You won't be able to use like a 70 to 200 or 70 to 300 or any of those telephotos for northern lights photography. You're going to want a wide angle lens. Some common lenses, like I have a 14 to 24 um, that I've been using for 14 to 24 millimeter that I've been using for a few years. It's a Nikon f2.8. It's been fantastic. I also was using like an 11 to 16. Right now, I've got 2 different wide angle lenses. I have a 16.5 f1.8, and then I have a 10.5 f2.8 that's it's kind of just like a play lens, a fisheye. And so make sure that whatever wide angle lens you're bringing with you on your DSLR or mirrorless camera has the capability to get to, I would say, at least f4. Um, that's how I started out many years ago. Is I had a wide angle f4 lens and it worked. It was okay, but if you can get f3.5, f2.8, or even faster than that, that's better. But f2.8 is kind of a sweet spot if you really want to set a goal for a lens. So, tripod selection. Now, on these photo trips, there's a really, really, big feature that Nat Hab does is we have loaner tripods for our photo trip guests. And they are the Manfrotto MT055 X Pro 3 aluminum tripod with an X20 pistol grip head. So Nat Hab's done a really amazing job picking this tripod and making it kind of their staple Northern Lights tripod. In particular, because it's got this pistol grip, which basically means you squeeze it and you can adjust your camera up and down, left to right. And there's less little dials on the tripod to try to basically maneuver and point your camera places. And so we have tripods. They're aluminum. They're big. They're like a 6 foot. I think they could maybe even go higher than 6 feet, honestly. But they're like a 6 foot tripod that's heavy aluminum. They probably weigh, I don't know, maybe 12 pounds each. And they've got really easy to use latches for extending them. Um, and basically opening and closing them. And and they work. You can actually do most of the tripod setup with the big heavy mitts on. That's how good they are. So another one is we often see some wind when we're up in Churchill, whether it's 10 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour. Usually, it's around 10 to 15, and it's just enough to cause some vibration in lighter tripods. So having this nice heavy aluminum tripod that's easy to use is a big step for us. And it's something that yeah, it's worked really well for a lot of people. So when it comes to tripod selection, we've got some great ones up in Churchill that we can lend you once we get there. Um, they have plates, tripod plates that attach to basically any tripod mount. As long as you've got the kind of little screw hole on the bottom of your camera, they'll attach there. Fantastic. So yeah, I've definitely gotten into a bus with a duffel bag with like, you know, 10 of these things, and it's like 100 pounds of tripod. So it's a good solid tripod, and we'll lend that to you for the duration of our time in Churchill. Um, Now, another question that comes up, and a lot of people often do, is, they say, oh, can I bring my own? I've got this really awesome carbon fiber travel tripod and all that kind of stuff. And so here's what I would say if you're thinking about bringing your own tripod. Um, Check to make sure that it's got these prerequisites. It's sturdy and heavy. It's easy to use in the cold. You're familiar with it, and it fits within your luggage allowance. So I've got a whole variety of tripods myself, and um, I will bring I will bring one for myself, but it's a heavy, solid tripod. I know how it works, and it's a Manfrotto. It's basically the same tripod that Nat Hab has. It's just my own personal one with a different ball head that I've had for ages, so I know it really well. Um, but what I would say is, if you've got something that has like the round twist locks, those are endless frustration when you're wearing mitts and it's really cold. They work fine, um, but it's just I've seen a lot of people trying to figure out the twisting when it's really cold and they're wearing the mitts and they can't get the quite the right. Your hands are cold a little bit. You can't get the quite the right grip on it to close the tripod or open the tripod, and it's just it's not the easiest. The tripods we've got, they've got really awesome kind of thumb latch program that makes them super easy to open and close even if you're wearing your gloves. So that's another one. If you're going to bring your own, make sure it's sturdy and heavy. It's easy to use in the cold. You're familiar with it and it fits in your luggage allowance. Otherwise, we've got a really robust kit for you. If you're thinking about bringing a remote, so corded remotes, it's just something. It's not warding you off. A corded remote. The ones that plug right into your camera, they are great. They work well, but the plastic and the kind of the housing for the cable often freezes and it can become brittle. So I would say they work fine. Just be aware that you have a fragile element around your camera. Now, what I've seen people have great success with is those that have purchased a remote specifically for their camera that is wireless. Now, that's like the next level is basically they set their camera up, they point it to the sky, they've got a functioning remote that they've tested at home so they know that it works, and they know how to set it up. Um, and then they stick their hands in their pockets next to some hand warmers and they just hit the button when they want to take a picture. And they can also use it with the bulb setting on their camera so they could hit the button and hold it and then let go when they're done, and they can do custom shutter speeds that way. So, if you were going to go to the level of getting a remote, then I would recommend, it's not a requirement, but I would recommend a wireless remote, because then you have that ability to put it in your pocket. And if it's not a rechargeable remote and it requires batteries, make sure you bring some extra batteries for it too. Um, with that said, if you're somebody who doesn't want to use a remote, I'm actually somebody who hasn't used a remote. I'm usually too busy to focus on setting up my remote and and stay focused using it. So I just use a 2-second timer, and a 2-second timer works great. You set it up on your camera, you hit the shutter, 2 seconds, takes the picture. It just slows down your process a little bit more, but it's totally fine, and you have to take your hand out of your pocket a lot more. But if you set it up and it's all dialed in, you can still wear your mitts when you hit that shutter button. So 2-second timer works great as well. Now, headlamp. Um, if you're looking to bring a headlamp, there's a few things here. So first off, if you're like, oh, I've just got this really great flashlight. So if there's one thing that I've learned, it's that the flashlight that you're holding in your hand to try to work on your camera and adjust settings and that kind of thing. Um, I've seen a lot of people who are holding it in their hand. They're just like, oh man, I need two hands to do this. I need two hands to adjust my camera. I need two hands to move the tripod. And so that flashlight either ends up in the pocket and they're not using it, it ends up on the ground, or it ends up between their teeth as they're trying to, you know, maneuver around their camera, and they've got a freezing cold headlamp between their teeth as they're trying to do it. So what I would, or a flashlight. So what I would really recommend is get a headlamp, and a headlamp with a red light setting. I'm just going to show you a couple ones here. So there's, headlamps have come a long way in the last 5 years, in particular with battery technology. There's some that come with a rechargeable battery, just simple kind of USB, plug it in, charge it up during the daytime, take it out at night. Um, those are great. Otherwise, most of them, they take like a AAA battery or something like that. But make sure that it's got easy to find red light setting. So my headlamp, I know that I just have to click it. Like I can set it to only use the red light, and I just have to click it once, red light's on, click it once, red light's off. But kind of have a look around. There's some really great brands out there, Black Diamond, Petzl, to name a couple, that have either rechargeable versions or red light headlamps, or headlamps with that setting. And then another one too, and I refer back to this a lot, but test it at home wearing glove liners. A fun one could be, if you're going to borrow our mitts, is just throw on some oven mitts and go try to use your equipment in a dark room. So shut the lights off, use your headlamp only to adjust your camera settings, turning your headlamp on and off while wearing big heavy mitts. Doing 15 minutes of that will save you a lot of grief. 100% when we're out there and it's -30 and the northern lights are in the sky and it's all very exciting. It'll just get you in the zone. So when it comes to your camera setup, and folks, I'm going to give you basically my settings. This is something that on the expedition itself, we're going to dive into a lot more. Every photo expedition leader has their own kind of process for teaching you how to take Northern Lights photography. Oftentimes this includes photography lecture that includes basically figuring out the camera settings for Northern Lights photography. Now, I mentioned it earlier, but there's Court's Northern Lights photography guide that has all kinds of really great preparation information for the trip. So I would definitely look at that, but I'll just show you, this is how I set my camera up every single night before I go outside. I make sure that this is what's happening. So camera shooting mode to manual. Take a picture of this if you want, or refer back to it when Nat Hab posts this. The shutter speed is 5 seconds. The aperture is whatever the widest your lens is capable of doing. So 1.8, 2.8, whatever is the widest. It's usually written right on the lens. There's usually lettering saying kind of what the widest aperture is going to be. So set it to the widest. The ISO, I just start at 1600 every night. I set my 2-second self timer, or if you have a remote, set your remote. And then I also set my infinity focus via manual focus. Now, infinity focus is a little bit more complex. The best way to do it during the daytime is basically to go outside, set your camera up, and then autofocus while your lens is still on autofocus. Autofocus on a very distant object. Could be, like the horizon line or something like that. And then once you've focused on that, switch the lens to manual focus, and that will get you into the infinity focus. This is something we do a lot of practice with and work on, and make sure that everybody's camera is set up into infinity focus on trip. But if you find it at home and you're like, yep, this is where infinity focus is on my lens. Some lenses you can actually like lock it in place either by taping it with a piece of duct tape, or marking it with a silver Sharpie or something like that. But we have that capability up in Churchill. We can help you with that as well. So anyways, these are the settings that I try at home. I make sure that I'm comfortable getting in and out of these settings from various shooting modes, and test this out in the dark just to see kind of what that ends up looking like. It's probably not going to be a perfectly exposed image. That's something that we really need to be outside in the dark photographing the northern lights to get into the right zone for these settings, but it's a starting point. Yes, and this is exactly what I was talking about. So test and practice, try in good light first, then try in the dark with a headlamp. And then once you've mastered that, try while wearing glove liners, and then try in the dark while wearing a headlamp and wearing glove liners. And then just, yeah, change your settings around, practice with your camera, adjust your ISO up and down, adjust your shutter speed up and down, practice with the self timer, the remote, all that kind of stuff. Super, super important to having a really successful Northern Lights photography trip. With that being said, when it comes to camera takedown, this is a big question that comes up, and it's something that's often talked about with cold weather photography. Something we do when we set up our cameras at the beginning of the night is your camera, once it's outside at a viewing location, it stays outside. And the reason for that is because we want to basically let the body of the camera just get cold. If we keep going from cold to hot, we're going to get condensation on the outside of the camera, ice crystals freezing to the outside of the camera, but also on the inside of the camera. And it's not such a big deal if it's on the outside, we can like wipe it off, but we don't see what's going on inside the camera. And sometimes you'll look and you'll be like, oh, my lens is all fogged up and there's ice crystals frozen to the inside of the lens elements. And the only way that you can fix that is basically by putting your camera into a well ventilated and dry space and let it dry out and air out for 8 hours or so. And so the way that we avoid this is basically, like I said, we leave our cameras outside at the beginning of the night. They stay out for the whole night. We're taking pictures. We remove the batteries and let those warm up inside. And then at the end of the night, when we're ready to head back to the hotel and get some rest, we take those cameras and we put them into a Ziploc bag or a large dry bag, or any reusable watertight bag will do. But basically, the idea is you want to make sure that it's wrapped and sealed and protected from the warm, moist air inside of a building or inside of a vehicle. And so at the end of the night, because usually, we've got our cameras on the tripod sitting outside for, anywhere from 2 to 5 hours, I'll put it into my dry bag, wrap it up, stick it into my camera bag like that, and then I'll just let it warm up to room temperature overnight in the hotel room, and then take the camera out the next morning. Of course, before doing that, you want to pop out your batteries, and if you're going to edit your photos, pop out your memory card before stowing it into that dry bag. But that's how that works. So do be sure to bring something like that for protecting your camera for the condensation situation from cold to hot. Now, another note, many of you may be bringing a smartphone. And so smartphones work really, really well in many instances, in particular since about 2019, image sensor technology just exploded. And so for the last 5 years, there's been some really spectacular capabilities for your phones. And I'll talk about the difference between the two after these slides. But most new models have night modes built in. So just quickly, directly from the Apple website, if you've got an Apple iPhone, night mode is available on the following iPhone models. And this is not completely updated. I'm not even sure what number iPhone we're at. I'm using the Google Pixel these days, but you can imagine anything newer than like an iPhone 11 is going to have night mode, and they're super incredible. Whoops. Um, and then so Samsung phones, basically uh, anything newer than 2018, 2019 as well. So I used to have a Samsung A52, and I had a Samsung Galaxy S20. Um, and before that, I had a Samsung Galaxy S9. That one could do it, but not particularly well. And then, yeah, sorry, I'll just go back to the Google Pixels one. Um, right now, I've got a Google Pixel 8 Pro, but Google Pixel has been kind of um, at the forefront of this for a long time. So anything newer than a Google Pixel 3 will likely be able to take images at night. So um, yeah, it's pretty incredible. A lot of these cameras, they're just set up, a lot of the smartphones are just set up so you take your phone, make sure the flash is off, make sure the live view is off, hold your camera up to the sky, and you'll see a little yellow moon shape illuminate with the number of seconds it wants to take the picture, and then you click the button, take the picture, wait those seconds while holding still, and then take your camera down. You'll see that it's created a night shot, and it can capture the northern lights, which is pretty incredible. So maybe you're coming on this expedition and you're just like, oh, I want to try doing night photography, but I'm not fully invested in it. Just keep in mind that those smartphones could do some work. So if you have an older phone than 2019, which I think that the number of those is really dwindling these days, um, uh, look in your app store for an app like Northern Lights, Photo Taker, or Long Exposure Camera. Yeah, if you're like 2018 or older, 2019 or older on your smartphone. But honestly, if the camera, there was a significant leap in technology that basically makes cameras that old very ineffective with low light and night photography. So, don't bet on this taking a fantastic northern light shot. Whereas the iPhones, Google Pixels, Samsung that are newer, they're amazing, and yeah, they can do quite a lot. Um, yeah, so when it comes to your smartphone setup, another great thing is to try in good light first, try in the dark with a headlamp, try while wearing glove liners, and try in the dark while wearing a headlamp and wearing glove liners. This is really important if you're intending on using your smartphone for Northern Lights photography, is the glove liners that you bring, make sure that you've got really good connectivity to your phone through those glove liners. Try them in the dark, try them when it's cold, um, that kind of thing. Just you want to make sure you have very good seamless connectivity uh, from the glove liners to the smartphone because it's all reliant on touch. And I've definitely had a few people on my expeditions in the past that have become very frustrated that their gloves were not transmitting to the touch screen. So whenever they took their gloves off, or whenever they wanted a Northern Lights picture, they had to take their glove off and expose it to the cold, and that's not the best thing. Another one too, if you're bringing a smartphone, the batteries will die quite fast if they're exposed to the cold for any period of time. They're getting better, but still, you know, smartphones are notorious for showing 90%. Then you walk away for 10 minutes, go back, and then it's at 15%, and you walk away, come back, and it's dead. So if you're going to bring a smartphone and use it as like a power horse for your smart or your Northern Lights photography, it's not a bad idea to bring a way to charge it up um, as you're taking pictures. So I would suggest, and this is something I've done in the past, just because when we go out to our viewing locations, we don't always have a power source. Most often we don't because they're meant to be kind of a little bit off grid. And so what I'll do is I'll bring a portable battery that can charge my phone up 1 or 2 times, or at least give it a little jolt of electricity. So if that's something that interests you and you want to make sure that that phone doesn't die while you're doing the Northern Lights photography, good idea to bring a backup battery source for your smartphone as well. Okay, so with that being said, the difference between the two, I think the camera is definitely going to give you the higher quality images. You have way more control over what your image looks like with a DSLR or mirrorless camera, and then you have a lot more post-processing possibilities using things like Lightroom and whatnot. The cons of it really, you need specific camera equipment. Many photographers or people coming on photo expeditions already have it. Requires some post-processing, just a little bit most often, and it's a little bit more of a more complex photo process to go from taking the picture of the Northern Lights to having a high quality copy of it on your computer or printed. Smartphones, easy to use, no specific equipment, great for quickly sharing your experience on social media and with others. Post-processing can be done in simple apps on your phone. Cons, usually it's medium quality, and because the sensors just are not as good as a DSLR or mirrorless camera, the battery can die randomly, and then you have very little control over how much light, contrast, etc. All of the manual mode functions of your camera you don't really have on your smartphone without some serious intervention. So there's your camera setup, selections, all that kind of stuff. I hope that has given you some insight. And I'm just going to run through this. So from Winnipeg, folks, we're going to Churchill, Manitoba, where that star is. We're getting there by plane. Our flight will be about 2.5 hours. It looks like this. It is an ATR aircraft. There's somewhere between 50 and 60 seats, usually, if that's the aircraft that we've got. 2 to 2.5 hours in the air. And then because this is a photo trip, we should really talk about our luggage because oftentimes we have a lot of luggage. So you'll have your check bag, which is your big suitcase. You can throw that into that'll be basically picked up in the morning that we depart, and it'll go into the luggage compartment of the plane and then meet you at the hotel once we get to Churchill. And then we have our carry-ons. Our carry-ons are usually going to be our camera bags. Maybe they've got a laptop, something like that. But some important features of that is if you want to bring the carry-on into the plane and have it with you at the seat, it needs to be no more than 10 by 16 by 12 inches and a maximum of 20 pounds. Now, if you have something heavier or larger than that, and I know that I do, I have a much larger backpack. It's basically, kind of the overhead compartment international size backpack. It's 9 by 16 by 21.5 inches, and it usually weighs a little more than 20 pounds. What I have to do with that on these aircraft, and this is Transport Canada regulations, what I have to do with that on this type of aircraft is it's a service that's called valet. And so we will valet that, we'll take it from you in the lobby in the morning, and it goes into, it gets basically taken all the way to Churchill for you, and then it meets us on the tarmac in Churchill. Your expedition leader will talk about this at the welcome dinner. But just so you know, those big, large camera bags, they won't fit with you at the seat, and that's okay. I've done it probably over 100 times now, this valet service, and we take very good care of your camera equipment. The airline takes very good care of your camera equipment and anything that's in those valet bags. And then with that as well, Transport Canada regulations, all lithium batteries or items with lithium batteries must travel with you in the main cabin. So If you're planning on putting batteries in your check bags or in a valet bag, you need to make sure you've got those on your person with whatever equipment, even if they're just in the pocket of your parka, they need to be with you going into the main cabin of the aircraft for all lithium batteries. And we'll talk about that one again at the welcome dinner in Churchill. So excess items, they can be stored in Winnipeg, and we have a room that is dedicated for our group's luggage left behind. So if you end up bringing way more than you think you need, or you talk with your expedition leader and you're just like, oh yeah, okay, maybe I don't actually need 40 jackets, I only need one. You can leave stuff behind in Winnipeg as well, and we'll talk to you about that in Winnipeg. In Churchill, this is going to be our main mode of transportation. We have a fleet of smart cars with tracks and skis. No, just kidding. We have some really fantastic buses with winter tires, excellent transportation. So our entire groups will be able to fit within a very, very comfortable mode of transportation while we're up there. In town, we'll be staying at a variety of hotels. We've got the Seaport Hotel, the Churchill Hotel, the Polar Inn, and some others as well. Um, and during the daytime, we'll be doing all kinds of stuff, looking around at scenery and things like that. But all our meals will be at basically whatever restaurants are open in town. The winter time is not necessarily the busiest time in Churchill, so we may have to overlap several times at the same restaurants. But they do their very best to make sure we're quite comfortable and have a good variety and lots of food to eat. Important, especially when it's so cold. And the hotels, they're clean, they're comfortable, they're dry and secure, and they're fantastic. So the rest of the trip, folks, outside of Northern Lights photography in the evenings, um, we're going to be doing some day activities. And on a photo trip, it's really important we see as much variety and focus time trying to capture interesting things. So we're gonna basically try to get you out for some sunsets. If we get more than one, great. We'll try to do that as best we can. We're going to photograph the landscape in different ways, the boreal forest, the tundra. We're going to see, we'll meet some sled dogs. We're going to head down to the Churchill River and look at the Churchill River, get some different shots while we're there. It's a very, very beautiful place. Photograph some ice. I think that's a really big topic, is photographing ice. Maybe some snowdrifts along the way, and some frozen ponds and rippling snowflakes, and looking for the smaller bits and pieces around the area, like the lichen on the rocks, and also observing the town of Churchill itself with some beautiful murals in town, as well as some funky features. Um, uh, and just it's such a fascinating town, and we'll get to spend lots of time photographing Churchill as well. And you never know, we may come across some wildlife as well. We're always going to be on the lookout for Arctic species like this Arctic hare, Arctic fox. There's also been some red fox around, and as well as some other visitors. So we're gonna keep our eyes peeled for wildlife as well. And I may ask you to lay down on your belly on the ice optionally to capture some images. But the daytime activities, we're going to be mixing, making sure we don't overdo it, so that we can spend a lot of time photographing the Northern Lights. But we're also going to go out, see the landscape, and see the town and all that kind of stuff. In the night, we have basically each night we're going to go to a different viewing location. We have a variety of viewing locations, including but not limited to the Aurora domes, the Wapusk Adventures cabin, the Aurora Pod, the our boreal forest cabin here, as well as a variety of other locations that we'll spend our evenings photographing. So lots of variety when it comes to foreground, and what we need is the Northern Lights to shine and to change and to show us what they've got. So that brings me to the end of your Know Before You Go photo expedition. I'll pass it over to you, Brooke.
Thank you so much, Eddie. That was very informative. I wish I was joining all of you on this trip. Yeah, I feel prepared, and I'm not even booked, so amazing. So I do have a ton of questions, and everybody, we don't have that much time left, so I'm going to do my best to combine as many as possible. And remember, if we don't get to your question, the concierge team will be more than happy to assist you. So there's tons of people at the office that will make sure that you are ready to go. So first, I received lots and lots of questions about Court's photo guide. Where is that available? Is that upon arrival? Is that in the pre-departure briefing? And if people aren't on the photo trip, can they have access to that too?
Yeah, that is available from Nat Hab. I think that's something that concierge could help you with. I did check. I asked if it was available to everybody, and I haven't seen it. I've seen it. I know it's there. And so, but that's something that that definitely would be made available to anybody that wants it. Um, but yeah, check in with the concierge, or I will actually follow up with NatHab to make sure that that's something that's there.
Perfect. Yes, lots of questions about that. People are very interested in that photo guide. Next, going to tripods. Will tripods be available on non-photo trips? And will there be enough tripods for both phone photography and also people with DSLR mirrorless cameras?
So the tripod situation, that's a good one. It's complex, but basically we have enough tripods so that everybody on a photo trip will get one. They're very photo trip oriented. Now on non-photo trips, there will be a number per non-photo trip issued. And so if you're concerned about, maybe having to on a non-photo trip, if you're on a non-photo trip and you're concerned about maybe having to share a tripod amongst several people, then I would certainly consider bringing your own tripod. But on photo trips, we assure that photo trips have tripod usage for everybody. Now, if you're somebody who is looking to do both, have multiple tripods, I can guarantee basically everybody on a photo trip one tripod per person. But if you're like, you know what, I want to set up my phone and DSLR or mirrorless camera and have kind of an array of photography equipment, then I would recommend above the one tripod that we can guarantee, bring additional gear for your other equipment.
Perfect. And everybody, our photo expedition director just commented into me that you can find that photo guide at nathab.com/brochures. So it is right there. I'm looking at the page right now. So it is even on our website. So you can go find it right now if you would like to download it ahead of time. So there you go. Thank you, Mike. All right,
Thank you, Mike.
yeah, thanks, Mike. Both of us. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Okay, next, for the wildlife photography opportunities, what lens length do you recommend people bring for that?
Oh man, for wildlife photography, so wildlife photography opportunities, um, and you know what? Because we're on a photo trip, it is kind of cool to do telephoto landscape photography, which is another whole thing. But it is kind of cool to take those faraway things. So I would recommend, anywhere from like a 70 to 300, 100 to 400, would be really really good. Those are some pretty common lens brackets. If you really wanted to kick it up, it's totally not necessary. It mostly depends on what you've got available. But I would say a telephoto lens that has the flexibility. A prime lens would be a lot harder to use for most of our opportunities versus like a 70 to 300 or 100 to 400. Somewhere in that zone would work really well.
Fantastic. And I know that we've already reached the end, but if you have time for one or two more questions, Eddie, that would be fantastic. This
I
next
sure
one I
do.
feel is pretty important. Could you, I'm just going to ask both questions at one time. Could you ask about if it's, I'm sorry, could you answer if it's possible to take videos of the Aurora? And then could you also maybe give a little bit of information about filters or drones? So that's the three for one.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. So, what I would say for the video side of things is the answer is it possible, or the question, is it possible to take video of the aurora? The answer is yes, but there's a big but. The quality is going to be really, really low because it's trying to do it in the kind of the at the same speed that you're seeing it. So you really need to have a camera that has significant capabilities in low light. And now some cameras do. I was using a Nikon Z6 for years, and I had an f2.8 lens, and that camera was able to, at I think it was 128,000 ISO or whatever it ended up at, that camera was able to do live footage of the Northern Lights, and it was brutally noisy and grainy, um, but it still captured the live motion of the aurora. So if you've got a faster lens, if you have something like a f1.8 and a newer camera, something that's maybe come out in 2013 or 2020, or sorry, 2023 or 2024, higher end mirrorless camera, you will likely be able to capture significant Aurora Borealis. But that also has got a but to it as well, which is it goes back to what the Northern Lights are doing. You need to have significantly bright Northern Lights in order to capture a quality video of that movement. And the Aurora can come in, from 0 to 100 when it comes to brightness. It's always varying. Every night is completely different. So you need to have the camera that's capable, a fast lens, and then you also need to have kind of bright moving aurora. Now, here's the other thing is some newer smartphones, they're also starting to tiptoe into the ability to take video of the Northern Lights because their sensors are really increasing. The quality will be questionable, but something like I think is it the iPhone 16 that's out now? That one's probably got the capability to do it, or the Samsung Galaxy S24. I haven't tried it on the Google Pixel 8, but there might be something on the Google Pixel 9 that can do it. So with phones, it's getting there. With cameras, you need to have the right set of equipment to do it.
Great. And then you could
Was
do
there?
also, yeah, as filters, like lens filters or anything like that, and drones.
Yes, so drones for Northern Lights and for Churchill and for Nat Hab trips at this point, basically it's a hard no for drones. Um, Churchill is in particular, one reason is Churchill is right next to an airport. And so flying a drone, we need to have basically permission from the Transport Authority or Transport Canada to launch a drone. We likely need special permits to do any of that. As well, drone photography, drone videography is something that we do not do on Nat Hab expeditions at this point. In Canada as well, to fly a drone up over a certain size, you need to have a license from Transport Canada and the Aviation Authority. Um, so drones, yeah, not not on this trip. And then when it comes to filters, the only time that I would say, you know what, yeah, let's bring a filter is going to be for the daytime photography. So, I've got on my 24 to 120 or my 24 to 70, I would be really comfortable putting a polarizing filter on there um, for cutting some of the glare and increasing some contrast in some of my daytime photography. Um, when it comes to, using a UV filter or a neutral density filter or polarizer filter for any night photography, the answer is hard no. You could leave a UV filter on there just as a layer to protect your lens, but that's also not necessary. It's totally up to you. So I would say for me, the only filter that I would be like, yeah, I want to have that is going to be a polarizing filter for probably my 24 to 70 for daytime photography.
Perfect. Thank you so much for all of that, Eddie. And everybody, now that I have the link to that photography brochure, I'm going to include it in the replay email that all of you are going to receive who registered for this webinar. So I will go ahead and have that so you don't even have to go try to sort through the website to find it. But Eddie, with that, I am going to conclude the question section of the webinar and I will turn it to you for any last closing comments.
Well, thanks very much, everybody. I'm really, really excited to get up there into Canada's subarctic and see what we can see. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of the world, and whether it's experiencing a real winter or the phenomenon that is the Northern Lights, I'm sure you're going to enjoy yourselves. All right, thank you very much.
Great. And thanks again, Eddie. And thanks to everyone who tuned in today. Join us tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.